Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking at a topic that's particularly relevant for those of you preparing for your UPSC exams.
It's a deep dive into a topic that sits right at the intersection of technology, economics, and even national security. We're talking about deep tech.
Deep tech, and specifically India's big push into it. We're going to be looking at this through the lens of a recent Parliamentary Standing Committee report that was covered by the Press Information Bureau, the PIB.
Absolutely. And this report really gets into the nitty-gritty of a pretty significant development. The government's proposal for a 20,000 crore rupee interest-free loan to boost deep tech in India.
Yeah, that's a lot of crores. So before we jump into the specifics of this loan and the concerns around it, maybe we should take a step back for a second and make sure everyone's on the same page about what exactly deep tech is.
Right. Because it's one of those buzzwords you hear a lot these days. But what does it really mean?
Well, in simple terms, I think of it as technologies that are built on, really groundbreaking scientific discoveries or engineering innovations. We're not just talking about the next app or software update here.
It's about fundamental shifts, right? Things that have the potential to completely transform entire industries or even create entirely new ones.
Exactly. Like artificial intelligence, for example. It's already having a huge impact on so many different sectors, and it's only going to become more pervasive.
And then you have things like quantum computing. That's a game changer in terms of processing power, with implications for everything from drug discovery to material science.
We can't forget about biotech, right? The advancements in things like gene editing and personalized medicine are pretty mind-blowing.
It's all really exciting stuff. And it also includes, areas like semiconductors, aerospace technologies, advanced materials, even cutting-edge renewable energy solutions.
It's a pretty broad umbrella. But I think the key takeaway is that deep tech is all about pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It's
Right.
high risk, high reward.
Exactly. It requires significant investments in research and development, often over long periods of time. And that's where this whole discussion about the government's proposed loan comes in.
Right. So according to the PIB's coverage of the Parliamentary Standing Committee report, India already has a pretty vibrant deep tech ecosystem.
Yeah, it's growing rapidly. We're talking over 3,600 deep tech startups in India.
And almost 500 of those were founded just last year, in 2023 alone. That's double the number from the previous year.
So there's clearly a lot of momentum here, but
Yeah.
India still lags behind some other countries in terms of its overall deep tech standing.
Yeah, the PIB report mentioned that India ranks third globally in the total number of startups. But when you zoom in specifically on deep tech startups, we're down at sixth. So there's definitely room for growth.
Which makes you think, right, what are the bottlenecks here? Is it access to funding? Is it a lack of specialized talent? Or maybe regulatory hurdles that are specific to deep tech ventures?
Important questions for those of you thinking about the bigger picture for your mains exams. Now, the government obviously recognizes the potential of deep tech, and they've launched a number of initiatives to try to support its growth.
Right. We have things like the draft National Deep Tech Startup Policy, which is aimed at creating a more favorable environment for deep tech innovation.
And then there's that huge corpus of 1 lakh crore rupees that was announced in the interim budget earlier this year to boost R&D across the board. A lot of that is aimed at deep tech.
And beyond those broad initiatives, we're also seeing more targeted funding in specific areas, like the 1,000 crore rupee venture capital fund for the space sector.
Or the National Quantum Mission, and the India AI Mission, which is trying to strengthen India's capabilities in artificial intelligence.
All of this, plus existing programs like the Atoll Innovation Mission and Startup India, are creating a pretty fertile ground for deep tech to flourish.
Okay, so that brings us to the big news from the union budget for 2025-26. The proposed 20,000 crore rupee allocation specifically for deep tech. That's a pretty significant chunk of change.
Yeah, it's a bold move. The idea is to provide this money as an interest-free loan to private companies to really supercharge their research and development in these key deep tech areas.
And there's also talk about setting up a deep tech fund of funds to further amplify investment in these potentially game-changing startups.
They're also putting more money into the India AI mission and creating an AI center of excellence for education to make sure we have the talent pipeline to support all of this.
So on the surface, it looks like the government is really putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to deep tech.
Yeah. But as with any big policy decision, there are always going to be different perspectives and potential concerns.
And that's where the Parliamentary Standing Committee comes in. They took a really close look at this proposed interest-free loan, and raised some pretty important red flags in their report.
Right. I mean, 20,000 crore rupees is a lot of money. And the committee is worried about the potential risks involved in giving it out as an interest-free loan to private companies.
Like what kinds of risks?
Well, one of their big concerns is whether this will actually lead to the kind of groundbreaking innovations and economic returns that the government is hoping for. Deep tech is inherently risky, right? There's no guarantee of success.
So they're worried about the government essentially subsidizing private companies that might not actually deliver.
Exactly. And they also question whether private fund managers will be able to effectively pick the winning projects. There's a concern that these funds might not be allocated to the projects that are most aligned with national priorities.
And the committee even suggested that it might be more effective to channel these funds through existing government research institutions.
Yeah, like the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, for example. They already have the infrastructure and the expertise in place.
The committee also raised concerns about potential national security risks. If these funds are going to private companies, how do we ensure that sensitive technologies don't end up in the wrong hands?
That's a valid point. They're essentially calling for more transparency and accountability in how these funds are allocated and managed.
And on top of all that, there's the whole issue of underutilization of research funds within the government itself.
Right. The committee pointed out that the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research actually had a significant portion of their budget unspent last year. So you have this situation where the government is trying to pump billions of rupees into the private sector, while their own research institutions are struggling to spend the money they already have.
And the PIB coverage of the report actually breaks down how the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research is spending its money. It turns out that a whopping 62% of their budgets goes towards salaries and pensions.
Which means only about 31% is actually left for research and development.
Yeah. So that makes you wonder if maybe some of those funds could be reallocated to support more innovative research projects.
That's something the committee is definitely pushing for. They're arguing that the government needs to address these internal inefficiencies before pouring even more money into the private sector.
And the committee didn't stop there. They also raised concerns about the state of some of India's public sector undertakings in the biotech space.
Specifically, they called out Bibziol and IVC. These are companies that play a key role in vaccine production.
And the committee's assessment was pretty blunt. They described their condition as poor.
Which is a pretty big deal when you consider India's aspirations to be a global leader in vaccine manufacturing.
Exactly. And the committee stressed the importance of reviving these PSUs to ensure that India has a secure and affordable supply of vaccines.
They even recommended specific revival packages to support these companies and boost India's vaccine exports.
So, pulling all of this together, it's clear that the Parliamentary Standing Committee is urging the government to proceed with caution on this whole deep tech funding initiative.
They're not saying that we shouldn't invest in deep tech, but they are raising some serious questions about the proposed funding mechanism, the underutilization of existing resources, and the health of critical public sector companies.
And they're pushing for greater transparency, accountability, and a more strategic approach to ensure that these funds are used effectively to benefit the entire nation.
Exactly. And for all of you UPSC aspirants out there, this debate really highlights some key themes that are likely to come up in your exams.
We're talking about the role of the government in promoting technological innovation, the balance between public and private sector involvement, the challenges of resource allocation, and the importance of national security.
It's all connected.
So as you continue your preparation, think about these big questions. How can India achieve rapid technological advancement in deep tech while also ensuring that our resources are used wisely and our national interests are protected?
What's the right balance between fostering innovation in the private sector and leveraging the strength of our public institutions?
These are complex issues with no easy answers, but by understanding the different perspectives and the concerns that have been raised, you'll be better equipped to tackle these kinds of questions in your exams.
And hopefully, you'll also be inspired to think about how you can contribute to shaping India's future in this exciting and rapidly evolving field.
Absolutely. We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. And if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them below.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives on the topics that matter most for your UPSC journey.
All the information we discussed today is based on a press release from the Press Information Bureau, or PIB. Thanks for listening.